There comes a time in every person's life when you realise it's not about doing what you are told, but doing what you know is right for you. Let us take a journey of learning and discovery with the world's most successful people who are living the life of their dreams, walking through life using their inner wisdom and being of service to others. Forget exams, grades and test scores. What is your purpose? As we let go of what we think should be and learn from our elders to gain knowledge, inspiration and a true sense of who we are. What are your dreams? Does your life have meaning? Are you living a life of significance? Let's talk with today's guest. Hello, my name is Mark Taylor and welcome back as we spend some more time together on the Learning on Fire podcast. Today I'm talking to Nick Freud. Hi Nick, thanks for joining me and let's explore the journey of who you are.
Hey Mark, thanks for having me. Super excited to be here. Just a little bit about who I am. My name is Nick Freud, as you said. I'm currently living in Brooklyn, New York. It's way too cold out here. I don't know if any of your listeners are familiar with Brooklyn, but I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a co-founder of a company called CampusReel. CampusReel is basically an education technology platform that is trying to allow any student anywhere in the world to get a really solid understanding of their college options without necessarily having to spend the time and money to go visit in person. We use video content mostly to bring campus to life, and we work with real students on campus. Our whole shtick is kind of raw and authentic content from students by students. My life is almost entirely revolves around running this company and trying to take this vision that my best friend from college and I thought of 2 years ago to fruition. So that's a little bit about me.
And it makes a lot of sense in terms of, especially like say when you're based in the States. Over here in the UK, it's like a long drive to see a university or a college might be like 3 or 4 hours in the car.
Yeah,
a little bit different when you're based in the US and you're talking about several days driving across however many states to get there.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I mean, now that you mention it, I actually a lot of my family is from the UK and they all came to study in the US. So when they were trying to decide what college they want to go to, luckily they came from a background where they were able to make the flight over to the US and do trips. But, for the majority of the families who aren't able to do a multi-$1,000 investment just to see if a school might be for them, it ends up kind of taking the US education system off the table, which seems kind of silly to us.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great idea. And having been through your website and looked at these things, it's a really it kind of just gives you something you can't do any other way, and it's also a different feel than when you're doing it in person too. I think the two things are sort of can work hand to hand. If you are able to visit them, brilliant, but if you're not, then you really do get a great insight into exactly what the university or the college may actually offer.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, and we can't take all the credit for it. We've worked with a ton of just amazing kids on campus. We've actually been really blown away by how willing this generation of students is. And I think it's probably because they grew up in more of a social media kind of vlogging era, but they're so willing to just kind of be vulnerable on camera and put themselves out there. Whereas when I don't have the capacity to do something like that. When I was growing up, I was much too shy to kind of want to video my story and put it out there for strangers. But these kids are really brave and really buy into the mission. So we've been super impressed.
Yeah, no, it's great. I think it's fantastic. And like you say, that sort of growing up in that digital age and where life is online so much, it's just a natural progression, I guess.
Yeah. So
let's sort of take a little look back now and just tell us what's your life, how does it look like now and how is it different from when you were growing up?
Yeah, cool. So I can just give sort of like a little bullet point on what my life has been over the past 26 years, and hopefully that sheds a little light on the question. But I grew up on the Upper East Side of New York in a pretty sort of affluent environment. I was given, everything that I could have wanted growing up. I had great family support. I was able to get one of the best educations that you can get throughout middle school and high school and then on through college, and lived a really stable lifestyle. But after I graduated college, I realized that the past 22 years of my life had kind of been controlled and decided for me. I was always operating within these institutions, mostly schools telling me how to spend my days and sort of what a productive individual looks like. And then I was finally I had this rush of a feeling of autonomy and like I could finally control my own life. So as opposed to jumping into the workforce like most of my friends were doing, I decided to kind of just pack up everything and move abroad. So I ended up teaching math and health in Thailand for 8 months and then sort of bartended odd job my way through Australia for another 8 months after that. I was by myself the whole time. And it was really a transformative experience that I think informs a lot about who I am right now. And hopefully I'll carry that with me for the rest of my life. But now based on the experience that I had once I kind of got out of the shackles that I felt like I was in when I was in school, I feel like my obligation on a day-to-day basis is to take ownership of who I am and what I'm able to contribute, and kind of live a life that I decide I'd like to. So my day-to-day right now is, it's 100% focused on getting this company off the ground, because it's something that I feel so passionate about, not just because it's a problem that I think needs solving, but because it's so personal to me. And it's me and my best friend. We've been living on couches together, just us two, in cafes for a year, building, finally got some investment, and are able to be in a real office and really see something that just started as an idea come to life. It's a really amazing opportunity. And I think it just dictates kind of the way that I engage with people on a daily basis and what I value now. And it's really just hard work, being kind to people, and being autonomous and taking ownership over your decisions.
I think that's great advice, and I think the people listening, especially if they're still involved in institutions, in whichever level that happens to be, it does feel like you have limited choices, doesn't it? It does feel like you're having to do everything within the confines or the boundaries of a school or a college or university or wherever you happen to be. But getting that experience outside of it, either, like you say, afterwards when you sort of want a gap year or you're working somewhere else, or feeling like you've actually suddenly got some control is a really interesting thing to be able to do. And I think also then, like you've managed to do, to kind of have put that into your life. You decide that actually you want that feeling to be important. I want to be my own boss, or I want to be able to follow my dreams, or put something creative into place. And then those sorts of skills really start to flourish.
Yeah, no, I think that's really well said. And I think, I don't want to sound like I'm kind of ragging on the school system or the way that it's designed, especially in the States. But because it provides so much value to students, and I wouldn't be the person I am today, and wouldn't be able to problem solve in the way I can now if it wasn't for my schooling. But I do think that one issue is that when you spend the first 22 years of your life, very formative years, operating in the world in a capacity where you have these structures basically guiding you through day-to-day life, and you can sort of sit back and just let these structures take the reins for you, you kind of default to a sense of comfort. And I think if you're unable to identify that that's what you've been doing for the past 22 years, when you're finally autonomous and have the opportunity to kind of take ownership over your life, the fear is that you end up defaulting back to kind of having that parent figure guiding you through the next, 5 years, and then the next 5 years. And I think just doing something to kind of rip the Band-Aid off, cut the cord, and put yourself out there and embrace discomfort is really beneficial, especially, at least it was for me, especially at that time in my life.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And you talked about the great value you get from your schools as well. So, and what was valuable about your school experience?
Yeah, so it's funny because when I was at school, I think like a lot of, sort of rambunctious teens and then going on into my 20s, I didn't really appreciate my education. And it felt like, I worked hard and I got good grades. I worked hard mostly to get good grades, and I paid attention in school. But I always kind of felt like people were just telling me what to do. And I didn't totally understand why I had to take the classes that I took. And then about a year and a half ago, I watched, there's a writer named David Foster Wallace who wrote a book called Infinite Jest, which is relatively famous at the moment, and they just made a movie about him. But he gave a speech at Kenyon College, speaking, essentially identifying the value of education, specifically a liberal arts education. And the main idea of it's pretty complex, and you have to watch it a couple times before you understand it. But the main idea is that an education system is not so much about what they're teaching you, without unless you're an engineer that needs to learn a specific skill, but it's really about teaching you how to think and teaching you how to take sort of the chaos that is the world and break it down into components, and then identify, if you have a problem to solve, and it's very relevant in the entrepreneurial realm. What we do is essentially make order out of chaos, and we have an idea and we kind of know where we want to get to. So we know where point B is, and we know that we're at point A, and then there's this whole water of chaos and possibility and kind of abstractness that we have to then confine and break down into like real identifiable problems that we can then figure out how to solve. And I think that way of approaching the world and learning how to problem solve something that's very complex comes from years and years and years of an education that compels you to kind of think outside the box and approach different problems from every angle possible. So now looking back on it, my education was completely invaluable, but at the time I didn't totally understand that.
I think the great thing about this podcast and talking to so many great people on it is the fact that we're able to kind of impart this kind of knowledge at this stage for people listening. You know, it's that kind of, I'd never thought of it like that. You know, I go to school because I need to learn maths, or I need to learn science, or I need to learn English. But to even have a conversation about, I'm here to learn about problem solving and relationships and working together and that kind of thing, it's a bit of a mind shift for people. But I think to even have those conversations going on at this level, that's really why I created this, really, so that people can start thinking about actually having ownership and actually getting out of their education exactly what they can while they're there doing it. Like I say, rather than so many of us who we sort of see the value looking back into it, but don't necessarily get the full value at the time.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I'm actually absolutely obsessed with podcasts at the moment. And when I was living abroad, the podcasts were kind of like my guiding tools to figure out how to live. I think what you all are doing in this podcast space is, you know, if people are paying attention, they take the time and get as much information and value as is being put out there in the podcast world, you can essentially like formulate a blueprint of how to live, because you see so many people who are on the other side of different experiences who are brave enough to let random viewers in and show them the mistakes that they made and show them where they flourished. And you can kind of model your life. You have a bunch of different examples of what works and what doesn't. And depending on what kind of person you want to be moving forward, you have a really clear blueprint on how to execute in that way. Or at least I kind of feel like I do.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think, you know, like you say, the great thing about the podcasting world is you've got people passionate about what they do. That's usually first and foremost. And also it's very intentional and it's very direct and personal to them. So you can literally just find what you're into, find the personality that speaks to you. And then, like you say, you always have that mentor working with you all the time, always in your ears at a time whenever you want to have them.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I mean, I think people bag a lot on the digital age, and especially with social media in terms of, you know, the negative effects that it's having on the generations growing up in it. But I don't think it's talked about enough, all the positives that we get from just unifying people in this way, or linking together communities and allowing just the dissemination of information is, you know, 100 times what it was even a couple of years ago. And the average person's ability to learn and improve their life and increase a skill set that they've always wanted to is so much more accessible right now than it ever has been. So I think that's a pretty beautiful moment or thing to capitalize on right now in the digital age.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Which teachers do you remember and why?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was actually thinking about that the other day. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I wasn't necessarily the best student, and especially in high school, I kind of felt like I just had so much energy and I was being forced to sit in a chair for days on end. So I wasn't the best behaved, especially when I was growing up. So, and that kind of rubbed teachers a little bit the wrong way. But one teacher that I do remember was a poetry teacher that I had. And it was, I felt like I was in a movie where a teacher like finds one of the troubled kids and sees something in him and kind of brings him out, where, you know, it wasn't as intense as it would be in some situations, but I was more of a, you know, unfocused kind of troublemaking kid. But he noticed that I had some type of eye or ear or brain for poetry. And, you know, in a class filled with some of the top academic kids in New York, he kind of picked me out and realized that I had this some type of connection with poetry and literature that I had no understanding of. And he would sit down with me after class for, you know, an hour once a week and just kind of take me through different aspects of what poetry is and kind of explain to me how my own mind worked. And it really taught me a lot about, one, you know, just the potential that I had to be intelligent and succeed in an academic environment. But it also, I found really interesting how blind I was to things that were going on in my own mind or to my own capacity to understand things. And it took a teacher who had only sat with me for a couple weeks to really pick up on that and kind of bring it out in me. So it was one of those sort of transformative student-to-teacher relationships that you'll see in movies or in books.
And I think it's so true that when a teacher talks to you, they understand you. And what I liked about your particular story is the fact that you didn't even know, it sounded like you didn't even know who you were in that scenario, but they saw it and were able to then support you in sort of discovering it. And I think that's a really wonderful thing.
Yeah, no, I think it's kind of the dream of all teachers. So I'm sure he got a lot of satisfaction as well.
Yeah, it's probably one of those dinner party stories he can say about, yes,
yeah, exactly.
I had this guy in my class and this is what we managed to do, which is brilliant. Who did you admire when you were young?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different people. I was very obsessed with sports growing up, so there were a lot of sports figures in my life, but that I admired. But those are more just for their ability to excel at such a high level. I think outside of my dad and my mom and my immediate family and some of my friends, once I really started to think about like who I wanted to model my life after and what type of person I wanted to be, Richard Branson was kind of the guy that just kept coming back to me. I read he's written, I think, 5 biographies at this point. I've written every one. And what I love about him so much is that there's a lot of things. And I think sort of anyone who talks about Richard Branson, it's always kind of wide-eyed admiration. But, you read books about his early days and you read about the icon that he is right now, and his disposition seems to have never changed. It seems like when he was growing up in his teens and he was just trying to get his publication off the ground, he was this kind of hardworking, sort of off-centered hustler who was kind to everybody he met and valued personal relationships more than anything that money could bring him or career success. And now as a multi-billionaire running empires, it seems like he came and spoke at Colgate, my alma mater, and he just seems like such a sweet, down-to-earth, genuinely good person who's really his only concern beyond personal like self-actualization and obviously success and the rewards that come with that. But it seems like he's just genuinely dedicated to being a positive inspiration to people and helping society when at a time in his life where he could just take to cool out on his yacht for the next 20 years and kind of ride it out. He's really dedicated to global change, and beyond just being such a good person, he's such a cool guy. And it's like, how could you craft up a better idol or mentor?
That's really it's really inspiring as well. I mean, I've read his books, and you're absolutely right. I mean, they're a wonderful read and full of so much amazing content. I actually live quite close to one of the schools that he went to, and you'll know from reading the book, his struggle with dyslexia and being in the school system and all that sort of stuff. And every time I drive by the grounds of the school, I just have a little wry smile on myself. Just that kind of, whatever bit of education you're in, no matter how you're doing, whether you're struggling or thriving, whatever it happens to be, there's that story of him just, making the world a better place and also making the world that he wanted it to be, even with the struggles that he had, just by a mindset, by a way of being with people, like you said. And I just love the fact that I get to sort of drive by there quite often, and I just have that kind of, it's a great reminder and a great kind of feeling of anything is possible because this guy's done it.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And I mean, just accomplishing what he has, but 100% on his own terms. It's so inspiring to see.
The other thing I always think with him as well is every time I turn up for a meeting and I'm not in a suit and tie, I just think, he managed to do it in a jumper. So
yeah, exactly. I feel the same way because I cannot dress up for these kinds of things. So I always just say, if Richard did it, then I can do it. Yeah,
for sure. So what was the best piece of advice you've ever been given, and who gave it to you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I was thinking about that a little earlier. So I'd say there's 2 pieces of advice. One is a little smaller, and it's something that my dad said to me about a year ago, but for some reason it just stuck. And I think about it every day. And it's I was just deciding whether I had some work to do, and it was about 9:30 at night, and I was talking with him on the phone, and I also had tickets to go to a comedy show, and I was saying I think I'm just gonna not go to the comedy show and do some work. And he was like, Nick, just trust me, it's always better to do stuff than to not do stuff. And I don't think he meant it in any super profound way, but I've kind of carried that with me for the past year and a half. And I noticed in myself that there's always that draw to comfort. And, there's always the idea when an opportunity presents itself, you also have the flash to kind of just sitting at home, taking a shower, watching some TV and hanging out. But that's no way to live. You need to open yourself up. If opportunity presents itself, you need to capitalize, and you can't let comfort is the enemy. So you can't let, the idea, a vision of, sitting home feeling comfortable be the thing that guides your actions. You need to seek discomfort, and it's always better to do stuff than to not do stuff. So that ended up being really profound for me. And the other piece of advice that I think about pretty much every day, especially when building this company. And it's something I heard on like a motivational speech compilation or some type of podcast. And the guy was basically saying, you don't want it to be easy, because if it was easy, it wouldn't feel so good once it works out and once you accomplish your goal. You want it to be as hard as possible. So when you get to that finish line and you finish the task, you get to the goal, you get that feeling of satisfaction. And, I'm sure some of your listeners are on an entrepreneurial path, but it's not always glamorous, and it is, there's a day in, day out kind of grind that's associated with it. And on top of that, it's really stressful because you just never know, success is not guaranteed, and your product working isn't guaranteed. And there's times where you can kind of get in your own head and get down to yourself and lose sight. But my business partner and I always try to remind ourselves, when we're feeling a little down, like this is the time that's going to make the success worth it. If you fast forward to whenever we think that we've done it, the company is where we want it to be, we're going to look back at the times where it was really tough and absolutely relish that. We don't want it to be a cakewalk. So I think embracing discomfort and embracing hard times with the recognition that the reward on the other side is going to be that much better is a really great way to live.
And I kind of like the halfway house between both of those bits of advice, because it's that kind of, you're absolutely right, nothing's guaranteed, and there is the hard work, and like I say, it doesn't just happen, there's so much that you invest in it. But that whole thing about also sort of getting out there as well, because there's also sometimes people thinking, but when I am successful, when the company's making multi-million dollars, then I'll go to the comedy store, and then I'll have the chance to do this, and then I'll have a chance to do that. And it is sort of combining that, like I say, really serious work ethic to do what you need to do, but also, you need to enjoy today as well. And I think understanding the combination of those two, and I think it's really interesting that both of those things came up at the same time for you. That I think that's really, it's a really kind of sort of cutting edge sometimes for people to understand. Live life full now, but at the same time knowing that within that there's a certain amount of effort needed, and like you say, even some sacrifice sometimes. But it's all slightly calculated once you actually understand both sides of the coin there.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think just to go back to what we were talking about the podcast culture, I think that lesson has been reinforced over and over again by some of the guys that I really admire, whose podcasts I listen to all the time, is that, in terms of living properly and living a good life and trying to sort of self-actualize and being fulfilled, there's ingredients to it. And a lot of it is around, hard work, discipline, and struggle. But the other side of it is, being present and being around people that you love and being in the moment and enjoying life and, eating good food and drinking good wine. So yeah, it's really just about like finding that balance, the yin and yang of it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. What advice would you give your younger self now?
Yeah, I think that people are asked that question a lot, and I'm sure my answer will change when I think about it more. But I think what I would try to get my younger self to understand, I mean, the first thing I think I would tell him is just like, chill out. It's all going to be fine. But I think that's probably what every person would say to their younger self. But I think one thing that I would want to get myself to understand earlier, that I think I got a grasp on more when I was living abroad than I did any time throughout my schooling, is that, people say trust your gut all the time. And I think it's become a cliche. And because it's said in such kind of terse terms, people don't actually think about what that means and writes it off. But I have come to think, and this is also validated by, some books I've read and some people I've listened speak. But I think that there is a part of yourself that is capable of making decisions for you, that actually has more information than sort of your conscious mind does in the decision that you're trying to make that information. And, you shouldn't trust your gut when you're trying to do something that's very tactful that has to relate to your business. But when you're thinking about, if you're thinking about something in a relationship with a breakup, or if you want to make a life change, or if you just have, if there's this feeling inside of you that you need to book a flight to Japan next week, and it might sound kind of crazy, but I think that there is a part of you deeper down that has more information and is calculating more variables, that is trying to push you to take certain actions that it think will lead to success. And if you can tap into that voice as much as you can and actually be brave enough to trust it and kind of follow through on what your gut is telling you to do, then I at least believe and would bank my life on that's how you lead to a more successful life. And that's kind of how I want to live going forward. And I would love to tell my past self to do that, is to identify that voice, feel it, and don't be scared of it, kind of lean into it.
Yeah, I think the idea of identifying with it, I think, is a really key one, to sort of know that it's really there to support you. And I had a conversation very recently. There's a guy who's in my percussion ensemble at one of the places that I teach the drums, and he's a great guy, a great player. He's just been offered scholarships to some music colleges, one in London and one in a different city. And we were having a conversation. He said, but if I go here, then I've got this opportunity and these people I'm going to meet. If I go there, I've got these different opportunities and different things. And we sort of chatted around it, and I said, look, you can make a list as long as your arm. Both of them will have pluses, both of them have got disadvantages. I said, but at the end of the day, you have to go with that gut feeling. Where is it that you can see yourself? Where do you think you're going to be the most at home? Where do you think you can be yourself? And from there, you can't make a wrong decision because you're making it out of something which is innately you. And also, nothing's forever. You can always change things if need be. But I think when you feel like you've got the answer inside of you, you can just allow it to rumble up and then come to you. You've got a fighting chance of actually feeling okay with it when it's just a question of, like you said, should I do this, should I do that? It's very difficult to make that decision just in your head.
Yeah, totally. And I think, you can think about these things in sort of more kind of airy, abstract terms in terms of like trusting your gut and your spirit. But I also think there's a lot of practical use in just realizing that you are able to calculate and evaluate different options without consciously thinking about it at all times. And I try to use that kind of in my daily practice when I'm working on my business. Like different issues come up all the time and there's different problems that we need to solve. And the way that I've, over the past 2.5 years of doing this, the way that I've found is most effective to kind of tackle complex problems or even think through strategy is to understand what I need to be thinking about and then kind of put it into the back of my mind or like send it back to my subconscious and allow it to kind of ruminate for a couple of days. And it's crazy how like the answer will just kind of pop into your mind at a random time when you're on a jog or in the office doing something else. And it seems like it's, you need your kind of deeper consciousness to be able to calculate everything, and it just shoots the answer right up to you.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. It's like you're not sure what's going on and you get a phone call out of the blue, like you say, or the right book comes to you or someone suggests something. And like you say, it happens more and more the more you become aware of these things, doesn't it? And I guess that you get more supportive the more you're able to let that in.
Yeah, very much so.
So, in terms of a resource that's really had a big impact on your life, what's really sort of got you in a place which you think has made the biggest impact? And I guess it could be a podcast, a book, a video, film, song. I mean, it can be anything, but something which you can really sort of pinpoint as something which has really done something for you.
Yeah, cool. So I could actually talk about this for hours. I'll try to keep the answer as concise as possible. I'd say there's in terms of specifics, what really helps me today, the Joe Rogan podcast, I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but the guests that he has on, I think are just super inspirational. And I really value the opinions that they give. There is a podcast entrepreneur and author named Tim Ferriss, who his approach is essentially to speak with world-class performers and kind of distill the habits and tactics that they use to be successful. And when I was abroad, I kind of treated his books like the gospel, and I would read them over with a fine-tooth comb and try to adopt whatever into my life I could find from these people. But the other sort of more general approach, I think, is reading biographies of people who you think have lived a life that you would like to live, or people that you admire. When I was living in Thailand, I read through maybe 25 different biographies of people who I thought to be really successful. And again, it's what we were talking about earlier. You read these people's lives and you have access to kind of undistilled, unfiltered, an image of these people who you kind of see as like these great God figures, and you see their vulnerabilities and you see where they took missteps and messed up, and you see how they bounce back. And if you pay enough attention and take in enough information, you really can kind of craft a blueprint to becoming the person that you want to be. But the first part to that is that you need to sit down with yourself and be honest and try to figure out who do I want to be and who do I want to model myself off of. But once you figure that out, the actual execution is a lot easier.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And if you want to find out details of all these things we've been talking about, then if you go to educationonfire.com and in the search bar, just put Nick Freud in there, and it will come up with the show notes and all the details of this episode. So you don't need to make a note as you go through. All those things will be listed on the show notes for you to go in and investigate in your own time. So for those people listening who are one, interested in the website you're talking about, but also want to know maybe a little bit more about you, where's a good place for them to go in and find more information?
Yeah, cool. So I if you want to find me, I'm on social, but I think what's more important and what I'd love for anyone who's interested to check out is my company and my website. It's you can find us at www.campusreel.org. If you know anyone who is going through the college search process or anyone who's currently out of college, this platform is hopefully going to change the game for anyone who's interested in applying and enrolling in colleges throughout the U.S. and then ultimately throughout the world. So we're super proud of the platform that's out there. If you have any thoughts, you can reach me directly. But yeah, we would love for you guys all to check it out.
I think it's fantastic, and congratulations, and I'm really excited for where you are now, but also, how many people you can impact over the time. So thank you, Nick, for sharing your wisdom and allowing us to learn from your great experiences.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mark. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Learning on Fire podcast. For more information, please visit educationonfire.com and follow the links from the homepage. This show is sponsored by the National Association for Primary Education. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.